I'd been on Southeast Farallon for 11 months. The rhythm was meditative by then. Wake at 5:30 in my bunk in the station house's damp chill, coffee on the propane burner while I checked the weather radio for whatever system was rolling in off the Pacific 27 miles west of San Francisco's coastline, usually fog. And then gear up for morning transect before first light ever actually broke through. My job was census work for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Population counts of common Murrays and Brandt's cormorants nesting along those jagged granite shelves that dropped straight into cold water, so deep it looked black even at noon on a clear day. Which we got maybe 3 times total since I arrived last spring, if you didn't count partial sun breaks that lasted 20 minutes before another bank of gray swallowed everything again, including sound, until all you heard was your own breathing inside your hood and waves slapping rock 200 feet below where you stood trying not to slip because wet guano makes everything slicker than ice, especially when wind hits 40 knots out of nowhere, which happened often enough that I kept mental tallies separate from bird tallies just out of habit, really, because data collection becomes reflex after enough repetition, even pointless data, like how many times per week salt spray crusted your binocular lenses beyond usability until you retreated back inside, cursing softly while wiping them down again. Knowing tomorrow would be same thing all over again, but quieter somehow because repetition strips emotion right out. Leaves only procedure behind, which I found comfortable, honestly, more than I probably should have admitted back home. If anyone asked, but no one did ask because people stop asking after 6 months away. They forget what questions fit anymore. So silence becomes default, both ways. Fine by me, truly fine. 2 weeks' supplies came via Captain Leon Ramos aboard his 30-foot cutter Mariner out of Sausalito. Regular as tide charts barring storms too heavy, even for him, which meant sometimes he skipped a cycle. Left me rationing canned beans longer than planned, but never missed 2 consecutively. Not once professionalism ingrained deep as those lines around his mouth from squinting across the water decades longer than I've been alive, probably. So when Mariner's horn echoed off North Landing Cove, right on schedule. Thursday afternoon, 8th day, since last run, 1,500 hours. Exactly per logbook entry previous drop-off, I packed my field notebook shut, latched window against coming evening damp, started down trail toward supply dock, thinking ahead already about inventory unpacking order, fresh coffee beans, maybe even oranges, if he remembered my note last time about scurvy joke, half serious, given diet here consisted largely protein bars, canned tuna-powdered eggs, occasional wilted cabbage he brought. Sometimes green things traveled poorly across open ocean, always arrived looking defeated, which made eating them feel vaguely charitable. But Doc held only Leon, standing beside stacked crates wrapped in blue tarps against sea spray. Usual amount boxes, 4, maybe 5, counting fuel canisters strapped separately beside them, except normally Anna Mills would have been there too, stepping onto planks with her own duffel bag full. Samples, data drives, mail from mainland, she shared rotation. Year-long overlap, 6 months, mine left. We coordinated schedules, so station never empty, required protocol, safety regulations, obvious reasons, remote location, medical emergency, etc. Complete sentence. Left, we coordinated schedules, so station never empty required protocol, safety regulations, obvious reasons, remote location, medical emergency, etc. Briefing stuff, she wasn't there though. Just Leon securing lines, avoiding looking up at me, approaching footsteps, echoing hollow under wood platform. Not my usual style. But the empty dock space where she should have been standing felt louder than the gulls. Leon turned fully then, but his eyes went past my shoulder to the waterline. Dr. Mills requested permanent transfer, effective immediately. He said it like reading a shipping manifest. Flat, no inflection. I waited for the rest. Medical emergency, family issue, disciplinary action back at headquarters. Nothing came. Just the wind pulling at the tarp edges. she all right?" "She left the island." He bent to check a strap on the nearest crate, though it didn't need checking. "That's all I know." Which was a lie. I could hear it in the space between his words. Leon knew more. He always knew more. But he parceled information out like we were rationing it. I'd gotten used to that over the months. His professional distance was part of the landscape, like the fog. But this felt different. This felt like he was already gone, mentally casting off lines while still standing here. "Who's covering the rotation?" I asked, shifting to practical because practical was safe ground. "No one assigned yet. Budget review. You're solo until further notice." He finally looked at me. His eyes were the color of wet shale. "Storm system moving in late tomorrow. Big one. Radio if you need anything before my next run." He was leaving, already stepping back toward his cutter's gunnel. "Leon." He paused, one foot on the dock, one on the boat. Did she say why? For a second, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice lower, almost lost in the slap of water against pilings. She stopped saying much at all toward the end. Just sat in the stern on the ride back, staring at the island until it was gone. Didn't even have her field kit with her. Left everything behind. He pushed off then, and I didn't ask anything else. Just stood there watching him maneuver the Mariner out of the cove, the diesel thrum fading into the white noise of the sea. The dock felt suddenly too large, the island too quiet. I hauled the crates up to the station house, one by one. The work was familiar, muscle memory. Inventory first. Check contents against the typed list. Note any shortages. Stow everything in its designated place. The station ran on order, on predictability. The fourth crate was heavier than usual. Canned goods, according to the list. I pried the lid off with a crowbar, the nails squealing in protest. Inside, rows of tinned vegetables, powdered milk, bags of rice. Issue. I started lifting them out, stacking them on the floor beside the pantry shelves. My hand hit something that wasn't a can. Wedged between the last row of tomatoes and the crate's southern wall was a field journal. FWS issue, green waterproof cover, spiral bound at the top. No name on the front. I knew it was Anna's before I even opened it. I wiped my hands on my pants, sat back on my heels. The station house was utterly silent, except for the constant low hum of the refrigerator and the faint, distant crash of surf. I lifted the journal out. It was cold from the metal crate. There was a slight bulge in the middle, as if something were pressed between the pages. For a minute, I just held it. This was a violation in a way. Field journals are personal. They're raw data, yes. But they're also half-formed thoughts, frustrations, sketches made in boredom. They're not meant for anyone else until they're transcribed and sanitized into official reports. But she'd left it, and Leon had packed it, or known it was there, and sent it to me. I opened to the first page. Anna Mills, S.E. Farallon Island Population Study, April 5th. The handwriting was almost architectural, confident. Notes on Murray clutch sizes, comparisons to previous year's data, weather observations. The professional tone of someone in control of their environment. I flipped forward. The entries continued in that steady, scientific vein for about 60 pages. Then, around late August, the handwriting changed. It became tighter, the sentences shorter, less about birds, more about the island itself. September 12th, fog held for 72 hours straight. Sound carries differently in this. Heard the foghorn from Mile Rock Lighthouse last night. Impossible. That's 25 miles northwest. Sound doesn't carry that far here, not with the wind pattern we've had. Checked instruments. Wind was easterly. Should have blocked it. But I heard it, clear as a bell. September 28th. Woke at 0300. Certain someone was walking on the roof. Got up, checked. Nothing. No scuff marks on the solar panels. Gulls don't land up there at night. Tried to go back to sleep. Couldn't. The entries grew more sparse. Sometimes just a date and a single line. October 14th. The silence here has a texture. October 22nd. Where do they go when the fog comes? November 3rd. I think it watches back. My own breathing sounded too loud in the room. I turned another page. The handwriting deteriorated further, jagged ink pressed hard into the paper. It's not a bird. It's not an animal. It's a pattern. It learns what you're looking for, and it shows you just enough to keep you looking. It wants to be counted. Do not count it. The words were underlined 3 times, the last line gouging a small tear in the paper. The next few pages were blank. Then, on the very last sheet with writing, a single paragraph. The ink was different. Black instead of the blue she'd used before. It looked fresh. Alfred, if you're reading this, Leon didn't tell you. He wouldn't. He thinks ignorance is a kind of protection. It's not. It just makes the noticing worse when it starts. They won't pull you out unless you ask. Ask early. Don't try to understand it. Don't give it a name. The moment you give it a name, you make it real, and then it can find you in the fog. I stayed too long. I wanted to know. That was the mistake. Don't make it. Just go. There was no signature. I closed the journal. My hands were steady. I noted that, clinically. The steadiness. I placed the book on the desk beside the half-unpacked crate. Outside, the last of the daylight was bleeding away, turning the fog a deep, bruised purple. The automatic beacon on Lighthouse Hill began its slow rotation, casting a brief, sweeping glow across the window every 20 seconds. I finished unpacking the crate. I put the cans away. I swept the floor. I made dinner, one of the new cans of soup, heated on the stove. I ate it at the desk, the journal lying beside my bowl. I didn't open it again. But after I washed the bowl and spoon, after I filed the supply inventory sheet in the binder, after I completed every single ordinary task of the ordinary evening, I sat in the chair by the cold stove and I listened. I listened to the wind. I listened to the creak of the station house timbers. I listened to the vast, consuming silence of the island at night. And for the first time in 11 months, it didn't sound empty. It sounded patient. The journal sat on my desk for 3 days. I'd placed it there after reading it, a square green object in a room of beige and gray. I didn't open it again. I did my transects. I logged Murray clutch counts in the master ledger. I watched the barometer drop ahead of the storm Leon had warned about. The journal was just another piece of station inventory, an artifact left behind. I told myself that. But on the second evening, after dinner, I found myself staring at its spine. The waterproof coating had a slight sheen under the propane lamp. I got up and made more coffee I didn't need. I swept the floor again. I didn't touch it. Anna's early entries were what you'd expect. April 5th, North Landing Transect, 0730. Brant's cormorant count, 87 active nests, plus 12 probable. Wind NW at 15 knots. Her handwriting was a model of clear, compact script. The lowercase t's crossed with firm, straight lines. The change was gradual. By late August, the sentences were shorter. Less about the birds, more about the space between them. September 12th. Heard Mile Rock horn at 0400. Wind due east. Impossible. She'd underlined impossible twice. The Mile Rock lighthouse is over 20 nautical miles northeast. Sound doesn't carry against an east wind. It just doesn't. Then the handwriting itself changed. It cramped. The letters got smaller, tighter, like she was trying to conserve paper or hide the words. September 28th. Woke to wait on roof. Investigated with spotlight. Nothing. No drag marks, no guano shift. Silence felt held. That's when the professional register started to fracture. The observations were still there, but they were pointing at something else. October entries noted the texture of the silence. November mentioned something learning the pattern of my rounds. That one made me pause. In our line of work, a pattern is what you seek. You map the nesting cycles, the tide-based feeding windows, the seasonal migrations. The pattern is the truth. The idea that something could be learning your pattern. It inverts the whole process. It makes you the observed. The final written entries were about the eastern rocks. That's a low tide zone, a jagged series of granite teeth that only show fully during a negative tide. Dangerous water. Strong surge channels. She'd written about movement beneath the surface. Not a seal, not a shark. Something holding a shape in the surge without fighting it. It matches the rhythm of the water, but is not part of it. What does that even mean? The last page wasn't a log entry. It was a single line, centered on the page, written in a frantic, downward slanting hand. The ballpoint pen had gouged the paper. I could feel the ridges on the back of the sheet. It said, "It was here before the rocks. It remembers when this was all deep water." I closed the cover. My fingers were dry. The air in the station house was damp, always damp, but my skin felt like paper. I put the journal down. Stress-induced psychosis. Isolation does that. The mind seeks pattern in noise. It's a known psychological effect. She was alone for a long stretch before I rotated in. I reasoned it out, point by point. The human brain isn't built for this much solitude. It starts to project. It fills the voids. Her transfer request was a rational response to a deteriorating mental state. Leon's evasiveness was just a deckhand's discomfort with the whole situation. I filed the inventory sheet. I stowed the empty crates in the lean-to. I did not reopen the journal. 3 mornings later, I was at the eastern rocks. I told myself it was a routine survey. The storm was still gathering, a deep, low pressure sitting a few hundred miles offshore. The tide was ebbing, a negative 0.8. It was the lowest tide in 3 weeks. Optimal conditions for assessing intertidal zone erosion on the southeast granite face. That's what I wrote in my field notebook before I left the station at 600. The walk is 20 minutes. The trail is less of a trail and more of a remembered route over slick, seaweed-covered boulders. The sound of the surge is different there. It's a low, grinding boom as water forces itself through stone channels, then a hissing retreat. The air smells of salt and crushed mussel shell. I set up on a stable plateau, about 15 feet above the waterline. The fog was a solid gray wall, about a quarter mile out. It muted the dawn light into a uniform, directionless gray. I could see maybe 100 yards of water, a churning lead-colored plain between the black rocks. I was counting cormorants on the outermost rock. My binoculars were steady. 6 adults, 2 juveniles. I noted it. Then my focus drifted just for a second to the water in the middle of the channel. A figure was treading water. My brain didn't process it at first. It registered as a seal head, maybe a piece of driftwood. But the movement was wrong. It was too still. The surge should have pushed it toward the rocks or pulled it back. This just held position. I lowered my binoculars, blinked, looked with my naked eyes. It was a person, a human head and shoulders above the water, The hair was black, plastered flat. The face was a pale oval turned directly toward me. The arms weren't moving, no splashing, no sign of effort. Just a head, upright in 55-degree water, in a channel with a 6-knot current. My heart did a slow, hard roll against my ribs. I fumbled the binoculars back up, my fingers suddenly numb and thick. I pressed the eye cups to my face, twisted the focus wheel. The water in my field of view jumped into sharp detail. White foam, dark, swirling eddies, the jagged edge of a submerged rock. The center of the channel was empty. I scanned left and right, my breathing loud in my ears. Nothing, just water and rock and fog. I lowered the glasses, stared at the spot. Maybe it was a buoy, a snagged fishing float. My mind scrambled for a data point, a known object to fit the shape. But I knew what I'd seen. The posture was all wrong. The stillness was impossible. No one could tread water that calmly in that surge. No one would be out here, 6 miles from the mainland, in this cold, without a boat. For 10 minutes, watching. The fog began to creep inward, swallowing the outer rocks. The water didn't show anything. I finally looked down at my notebook. I'd pressed my pencil so hard into the paper that the lead had snapped. I hadn't felt it break. I radioed the Coast Guard that afternoon. The procedure is straightforward. You call on VHF Channel 16, identify yourself and your location, request a switch to a working channel. My voice sounded flat, even to me, like I was reading a supply list. Coast Guard Station San Francisco. This is Fish and Wildlife researcher Alfred Butler on Southeast Farallon Island. Request information on reported vessel traffic in my vicinity. Over. The response was prompt. A woman's voice, clean and professional. Farallon researcher. This is Coast Guard Station San Francisco. Switch to Channel 22 Alpha. Over. I switched. Station San Francisco, researcher Butler on 22 Alpha. I'm inquiring about any recreational or unauthorized vessel reports near the Farallon Islands in the past 24 hours. Over. Researcher Butler, this is Lieutenant Ellie Skinner. We have no reports of recreational vessel traffic in the Farallon zone for the past 6 days. The last advisory was for the commercial supply cutter Mariner on Thursday. Is there a specific concern? Over. 6 days. I looked at the microphone in my hand. The plastic was cool. Lieutenant, I observed a possible person in the water near the eastern rocks of southeast Farallon at approximately 0640 this morning. No vessel visible. Could you check for any overdue swimmer or diver reports? Over. There was a pause. I heard the faint click of a keyboard. Negative, researcher. No missing persons reports, no dive charters filed for that area. Sea state has been moderate to rough. Water temperature is approximately 55 degrees. Survival time would be limited. Are you certain of your observation? Over. The question was protocol. It wasn't skeptical. It was just the next logical question. Are you certain? I saw the black hair. The pale, motionless face. The arms submerged, not moving. I observed a head and shoulders above the water for approximately 5 seconds before losing visual contact in the fog. I said, my words measured. It was in the main surge channel at low tide. Over. Another keyboard click. Understood. We will log a report of a possible person in the water at that location and time. We have no assets available for a search in your immediate area absent a confirmed distress signal. Do you have any additional information on the individual's condition or possible point of origin? Over. No, I thought. The first time I saw her again was 3 mornings after the radio call to the Coast Guard. Burrow 600, Eastern Rocks. I was back on the plateau, notebook open, binoculars around my neck. I told myself I was verifying tidal erosion patterns. The fog was a thin veil, the kind that makes distances tricky. I finished a cormorant count on Rock 3B and swept the glasses left, a grid pattern. And there she was. Not in the main channel this time. She was 30 yards northeast, in the lee of a barnacled spire the survey maps call the Finger. Head and shoulders above the water, black hair plastered to pale skin, facing me. Motionless. The surge lifted her, dropped her, but she didn't drift. She held position. I lowered the glasses. My breath was even. I counted to 5. I raised them again. She was gone. Just green water and white foam around the base of the spire. I logged it. 0642. Observed anomalous surface disturbance NE of Finger. Possible submerged debris. No avian activity present. That evening, at 1855, I was on the West Ridge checking the weather gauge. I glanced down at Shubrick Point. She was there, 200 yards out, a dark speck in the reddening glare off the water, watching the station. I had the binoculars this time. I saw the same pale face, the same absolute stillness. She vanished when a low swell passed between us. I didn't log that one. The pattern established itself over the next 4 days. Dawn and dusk, always in the water, always facing me. Her distance varied, sometimes 200 yards, sometimes 50, but it was never random. It correlated inversely with the fog density. Thicker fog, closer proximity. I started predicting it. That's when I opened a new page in my field journal. Not the official ledger. My personal one, the gridded survey notebook. I drew a rough map of the island's eastern and northern shorelines. I began plotting her positions with small, accurate X's. I noted time, tide, light conditions, visibility. I started noting other things too. The temperature drop I felt in my hands just before she appeared. The way the gulls would go silent about 30 seconds prior. Not agitated, just absent. I know how this sounds. I'm a biologist. I was constructing an ethogram for a phantom. But it wasn't curiosity. Not the clean, clinical kind. It was something deeper. A pull in my gut that had nothing to do with science. Every time I saw her, a cold, clear recognition flashed behind my sternum. Not I know you, but you are knowable. It was the most dangerous feeling I've ever had. It made the data feel necessary, like a lifeline. My father was a civil engineer. He taught me that before you can solve a problem, you have to measure it. You have to believe the numbers more than you believe your fear. So I measured. She was always there. 0615, 1850, a constant. My own personal lighthouse. The turning point was on the 7th day, a negative tide, one of the year's lowest. The eastern rocks were exposed, a jagged black landscape of mussel beds and dripping kelp. The water in the channels was slack, clear, and strangely still. The fog was a high ceiling, diffuse light. My map was nearly full of X's. They clustered around 3 specific locations, all within a 50-yard arc. One was at the base of a nearly sheer cliff face, accessible only at a tide like this. I had promised myself I wouldn't. It was stupid, against every protocol for solo work. I climbed down. It was technical, not a hike. I used handholds in the basalt, my boots slipping on wet algae. The air grew cold and damp, the sound of the distant surf muted. I reached a broad, flat shelf about 8 feet above the waterline. The channel here was a deep, narrow cut, maybe 15 feet across. The water was black glass. I didn't see her at first. I was checking my watch, noting the time, the coordinates. I looked up. She was in the center of the channel, 10 yards away, closer than ever. So close I didn't need the binoculars. She wasn't treading water. She was upright, suspended, as if standing on the bottom. But the depth there was 30 feet. Her arms were at her sides, underwater. Her hair floated around her shoulders like dark seaweed. Her face was empty, not peaceful, not menacing, blank, like the face of a statue that had never been meant to represent anything human. She watched me. I watched her. For 30 seconds, we stayed like that. The only sound was water dripping from the kelp somewhere to my left. Plink, plink. I noted the pallor of her skin, the dark hollows of her eyes, the lips that weren't blue from cold, just pale. I looked for gill slits, for webbing, for any morphological adaptation. There was nothing. Just a woman in the water. A thought, clean and professional, cut through the silence. Hypothermia would have caused incapacitation within minutes. This is not a person. This is an observation. Then she submerged. She didn't dive. She didn't sink. She simply faded backward, down into the black water, her face the last thing to disappear. Her eyes never left mine. The moment she was gone, a shock of cold shot up my legs. I looked down. I was standing in the Pacific Ocean. Knee-deep, my boots were full of seawater. My cargo pants were soaked to the thigh. I had no memory of stepping off the rock shelf, no memory of wading in. I hadn't felt the cold until she left. I stumbled backward, fell onto the shelf, scraping my palm on a barnacle. The pain was bright and real. I scrambled away from the edge on hands and knees, then stood up, heart hammering against my ribs. Water poured from my boots. I was shivering. I climbed back up the cliff face. It took twice as long. My hands shook. Every few feet I'd stop and look back at the channel. It remained empty. Back in the station, I peeled off the wet clothes. I toweled myself dry. I made coffee but didn't drink it. I sat at the desk, the damp from my hair dripping onto the wood. The green journal was right where I'd left it. I opened it to the last written page. To Anna's final warning. I'd read it as a mad woman's rant about a monster. Don't try to understand. Don't name it. A name makes it real. But I had been understanding. I had been naming. Dawn sighting. Position correlated to fog density. Behavioral pattern consistent. I looked at my own map, at the cluster of X's by the deep channel. My understanding was the problem. My observation was the invitation. It wasn't about what she was. It was about what the act of watching did. It collapsed the distance. It drew you in. 1 minute you're plotting points on a chart, the next you're in the water up to your knees with no idea how you got there. The measurement was the following. Anna hadn't been warning me about a creature in the fog. She'd been warning me about the notebook in my hands. The morning after I stood in the channel, I radioed Leon. It was 800. I'd made coffee but couldn't drink it. My hands were steady, which felt like a lie. I keyed the VHF, went through the call-up on channel 16, switched to 22 Alpha. The Mariner's radio crackled to life almost immediately, like he'd been waiting. Go for Mariner. Leon, it's Alfred. A pause, just the white noise of the sea between us. 2 days early, Alfred. Storm still brewing. You need a weather update? I need extraction. I said it flat, no let in. A direct report. The words left a metallic taste in my mouth. Silence stretched, not dead air. I could hear the faint hum of his boat's electronics, the distant creak of something. 10 seconds. 15. Say again? His voice was lower. I am requesting emergency extraction from the Farallon station, effective today. Another silence. This one felt different. Thick. I watched the rain-spattered window, the gray wall of fog sitting a quarter-mile offshore. Alfred. He said my name like it was a fragile object. Are you injured? Is there a medical situation? No. Equipment failure? Structural issue with the house? No. Then clarify the nature of the emergency. I closed my eyes. The professional demand, the protocol. I had nothing that would satisfy it. I couldn't say I'm being watched by something that stands in the water and makes me forget time. I couldn't say I waded into a 55-degree channel and didn't feel it. The data was all in my personal notebook, not the official ledger. It was hearsay, a stress report. Psychological grounds, I said. The term clinical and cold. I am unable to safely maintain the station solo. I expected pushback, budget talk, logistics, a reminder of my contract. I didn't expect the quiet that followed. It was a listening quiet. Leon, I heard you. A sigh, worn thin. Okay, listen. The weather window is tight. I can be there by 1500 today. You need to be ready to move. Tide's falling this afternoon. I can only give you 10 minutes at the dock. You understand? Yes. Thank you. Don't thank me. The words were sharp, then softened by static. Just be ready. He should have signed off. The exchange was complete, but the channel stayed open. I could hear him breathing. Alfred. His voice dropped to a near whisper, like someone might overhear. Did you start keeping a notebook? The question froze the air in my lungs. My eyes went to the desk. The green journal. My own black one beside it, filled with X's and times. I keep the official census ledger, I said, defensive. Not that. A personal one. Observations. Things that don't belong in the report. I didn't answer. My silence was the answer. Yeah. He said it like a confirmation of a diagnosis. Anna had one. She was filling it right up until the end. Drawings, times, locations. Like she was tracking a storm. Leon, what are you? The researcher before Anna. Mark. He radioed me one Tuesday morning. Same request. Emergency extraction. Psychological grounds. He was packed and waiting on the dock, just like you'll be. He had a notebook, too. A blue one. He threw it into the sea as we pulled away. I watched it sink. The station house creaked around me. The propane burner hissed. The woman before Mark. Same thing. 9 months in, a sudden call, a single bag on the dock. He cleared his throat. You're the 9th researcher in 4 years, Alfred. Did you know that? The rotation was supposed to be 2 people, overlapping. But no one ever signs a second contract. They just leave. The agency stopped giving reasons in the job postings 3 years back. Just solitude required and strong mental resilience. They don't explain why. The pieces locked together, not a puzzle, a machine clicking into place. The high turnover wasn't budget cuts or remote hardship. It was a purge, a silent, regular evacuation. They know, I whispered. They don't ask questions, he corrected. His voice was tired. They just send the boat when you call. 1500. Be ready. The radio clicked off. The microphone was limp in my hand. 9 researchers. 4 years. I thought of the empty bunks, the ghost of routine in this house. Anna wasn't the first. She was just the latest to notice the pattern, to try to map it, to try to give it a name. I packed 1 bag, just my personal kit. Clothes, my toothbrush, my passport from the lockbox. I left the government-issued gear neatly arranged on my bunk. The binoculars, the rain suit, the waterproof boots. I stripped the sheets and folded them. I emptied the compost bucket. I wiped down the counter. It was methodical. It was a retreat. I did not look at the eastern rocks. Not once. I kept my eyes on my hands, on the floorboards, on the path ahead of me. At 14:45, I walked down to the supply dock with my single bag. The fog had advanced, swallowing the lighthouse. The air smelled of salt and cold stone. The mariner emerged from the gray like a ghost ship. Leon didn't blow the horn. He nudged the hull against the tires lashed to the dock, killed the engine. He came out to the gunwale but didn't throw a line. He just looked at me, his face grim. "Toss your bag." I did. He caught it, set it aside. He extended a hand. I took it, and he pulled me aboard. His grip was strong, calloused. He didn't let go for a second, his eyes searching mine, looking for something. Damage, maybe. Or recognition. "Go sit in the cabin. Don't look back." I went. The cabin was warm, smelling of diesel and coffee. I sat on the bench. Through the windshield, I saw him cast off, move to the helm. The engine grumbled to life. He backed us away from the dock, turned the bow toward the open sea. He never looked at the island either. We were a mile out, the Farallones dissolving into a dark smear in the fog behind us when the shivering started. It began deep in my core, a violent, rattling tremor that clenched my jaw and made my vision blur. I hugged myself, confused. The cabin was warm. I wasn't wet, but my bones were cold, a cold that felt ancient and fresh all at once. I remembered my field journal. It was in my bag. I'd packed it without thinking, a reflex. I unzipped the bag, pulled it out. The black cover was damp. I opened it to the last logged entry. Site, Eastern Channel, Shelf 3B. Time, 0648. Tide, 1.2 FT. Observation, subject at 10 yards. Direct visual. Duration of visual contact, 30 seconds. My handwriting was clear. Then below it, in the same ink but written with a tremble I didn't remember. Water temp, 55 degrees. Hypothermia onset, 10-minute loss of motor control, 2 to 3 minute error. And then the time logged at the very bottom, after a blank space. Return to shelf, climb commenced, 0652. I stared at the numbers. 0648 to 0652. 4 minutes, not 30 seconds. I had looked at her, and then I had waded into the channel. The notebook didn't record that action. It wasn't an observation. But it recorded the unfeeling, relentless march of time. 4 minutes of walking into the Pacific. 4 minutes of water rising from my ankles to my knees to my thighs. 4 minutes of cold leaching into my marrow, unnoticed, while I watched something that watched me back. The cold I felt now in the boat wasn't the cabin's temperature. It was that delayed reaction finally reaching my brain. The truth, arriving 4 minutes late. The shudder that racked me wasn't a chill. It was the understanding of where I had been and what had been holding me there. And the new, permanent understanding of myself. I was the scientist who had so faithfully recorded the exact moment he was being unmade. The mariner's diesel thrummed through the deck plates and up through the soles of my boots. I sat on a molded fiberglass bench in the stern, my duffel bag between my feet, and watched the island shrink. Leon had the wheelhouse door propped open with a wooden chock. He didn't speak. The boat rose and fell in a long, lazy rhythm as we moved into open water, the swells flattening out into oily hills. The kind of sea that looks calm from a distance, but has a deep, rolling pulse underneath. I kept my hands flat on my knees. My fingers were steady. My breathing was even. I cataloged the facts. We were making 7, maybe 8 knots. The fog was a solid gray wall astern, already swallowing the sharp peaks of southeast Farallon. The automatic beacon's flash was gone. The silence out here was different. It was just the absence of land noise. I'd spent 11 months measuring that island. I knew its morning moisture content, the preferred nesting ledges of the Murrays on Lighthouse Hill, the exact number of steps from the station house door to the supply dock. I had charts. I had logs. I had a waterproof journal in my bag that was a perfect record of my own undoing. Anna had asked for a permanent transfer. I finally understood the wording. Not an evacuation, not a leave, a transfer. A bureaucratic term that implied continuity, a move from one assignment to another. She hadn't wanted to leave the service. She just needed to be somewhere else, anywhere else. I looked down at my hands again. The scrapes on my palm from the climb back up the cliff were pink and clean. I'd washed them with station soap. The skin was already puckering at the edges, healing. My body was proceeding according to schedule. My mind kept looping back to the channel. The 4 minutes. The notebook entry I wrote afterward, the clinical detachment of it. Subject observed for approximately 30 seconds. A lie I'd told myself in perfect handwriting. Leon cut the engine back a notch. The vibration softened. He leaned out of the wheelhouse, one hand on the frame. "Coffee's hot," he said. His voice was neutral, a courtesy. "I'm all right," I said. "Suit yourself." He didn't go back in. He stayed there, looking past me at the water behind us. His eyes were the same color as the sea, a flat gray-green. He was a man who spent more time looking at horizons than at faces. "You packed light," he said after a minute. "Just my things." "Leave the gear." "It's on the bunk, folded." He nodded slowly, as if I'd confirmed something. "They'll send another one, in a month or two, after the storm cycle passes." I didn't ask who. It didn't matter. Someone else would get the orientation packet, the keys, the quiet speech about resilience and solitude. They'd unpack their own notebooks. "Anna left her kit too," I said. It wasn't a question. She did. And the one before her, Mark. Leon's expression didn't change. He spit carefully over the lee side, watching the wind take it. "They all do, in the end." He looked at me then. "You held out longer than most. 11 months is a long run. A long run, like it was a race, a metric." I felt a cold knot tighten below my ribs, separate from the ambient chill. "How many?" I asked. "How many what?" "Researchers, in the last few years." He considered the question, his gaze drifting back to the fog bank. He was calculating, not evading. "You're the 9th, he said finally. "Since they stopped the full-time keeper rotation, 4 years, 9 researchers. Average stay." He shrugged. 5, 6 months. Anna did 8. You did 11. 9 people. I thought of the green journal on the desk, the gouged final line. It was here before the rocks. How many of those others had kept their own versions? How many had filled pages with careful script before the writing changed, tightened, became a warning they left behind for no one? "The agency knows," I said. "They process the transfer requests. They don't ask questions. The budget for the station stays the same. The data keeps coming in." He said it like he was reading a weather report. "They tweak the job postings now, emphasize the solitude part, use words like self-sufficient and high tolerance for isolation. They get applicants anyway, always do. A professional vacancy, a position to be filled. The phenomenon wasn't a secret, it was a parameter, a known condition of employment, like the risk of falling on wet rocks or the inevitability of damp bedding. They'd optimized for it. I turned on the bench and looked astern again. The islands were a faint, jagged stain on the horizon now, a smudge of charcoal against the lighter gray of the fog. The distance was a factual thing. I could estimate it. 4 nautical miles, maybe 5. The water between us was just water. It had no texture, it held no memory, but I could feel the channel. The way the cold had not been cold, just an absence of feeling. The way time had folded in on itself. I had stood there, knee-deep, for 240 seconds, and my brain had recorded it as 30. That discrepancy was now a permanent feature of my interior landscape. A calibration error I couldn't correct. I understood, with a clarity that felt surgical, why Anna hadn't explained, why her final message was a command, not a description. Don't try to understand. Don't give it a name. Understanding was the act of bridging the gap. Naming was the act of calling it forth. I had done both. I had mapped her. I had logged her coordinates, her timing, her correlation with fog density. I had turned the unnamed into a data set, and in doing so, I had built the path she used to cross over to me. My notebook wasn't a record of the encounter. It was the encounter itself. The shivering started again then. A deep, cellular tremor that began in my lower back and radiated out to my limbs. My teeth clicked together once, hard. I clamped my jaws shut. It wasn't the cabin temperature. The cabin was warm, smelled of diesel and old coffee. This was a delayed reaction, a physiological settlement of accounts. My body was presenting the invoice for those 4 unregistered minutes in 55-degree water. Leon saw it. He disappeared into the wheelhouse and came back with a thick, grease-stained pea coat. "Put this on." "I'm not cold," I said, my voice tight. "Put it on anyway." I took the coat. It was heavy, smelled of engine oil and salt. I pulled it on over my sweater. The shivering didn't stop, but the weight helped. It grounded me. I was real. The coat was real. The bench under me was real. "It'll pass," Leon said. He wasn't talking about the chill. He went back to the wheel, nudged the throttle forward a hair. The engine note deepened. I stared at the diminishing islands until they were gone. Not vanished into fog, but gone, dissolved into the seamless gray of sea and sky. The last fixed point disappeared. There was only the circle of the ocean and the low drone of the engine and the relentless forward motion of the boat. I thought about my final report. I would file it electronically from the mainland. Forms, species counts, weather observations, equipment inventory. I would note the increased erosion on the eastern rocks due to winter storm action. I would not mention the figure in the channel. I would not reference auditory anomalies or perceptual disturbances. I would sign off with the closing. Station secured for next occupant. The data would be clean, usable, normal. It would be a lie, but a useful one. A lie that maintained the necessary distance. Some distances, once crossed, cannot be uncrossed. I had crossed one. I had waded into a channel that was not just water. I had made eye contact with a pattern that learned. The act of observation had been a two-way current. I had documented her, and in doing so, I had invited her to document me, to learn my patterns, my solitude, my stubborn need to know. I would not go back. Not to the Farallons, not to any coastal station, not to any place where the fog had a texture and the silence could be listened to. I had a list of inland opportunities I'd bookmarked over the years. Forestry Service survey work in the Sierra, soil sampling in the Great Basin, places with fixed terrestrial horizons, no tides, no salt spray, no ceaseless patient murmur of surf on rock. The mainland appeared as a thin brown line ahead. It solidified slowly into headlands, then cliffs, then the muted rooftops of the coastal towns. The sun was a diffuse brightness behind the overcast. The world regained its ordinary edges. Leon slowed the Mariner as we approached the harbor mouth. The water changed from deep blue-green to a choppy silt brown. Gulls appeared, screaming and wheeling. The air smelled of seaweed and creosote and car exhaust. The soundscape layered itself. Boat horns, a distant chainsaw, the clang of a buoy. He guided us into the slip with a practiced ease, killing the engine at the last second so we kissed the rubber fenders with a soft groan. The silence that followed was dense with ordinary noise. I stood up. My legs held. I took off his coat and handed it to him. "Thank you." He took it, draped it over the wheelhouse chair. "What will you tell them?" he asked. "Not the agency. My friends, my family, anyone who asked." "The work was done," I said. "It was time for a change." He accepted that. It was true as far as it went. I shouldered my duffel bag. It felt impossibly light. It contained everything I owned that mattered now. Clothes, a passport, a toothbrush, a black field journal that was a finished story. I stepped onto the dock. The wood was solid, unmoving. The land was steadfast. Leon stayed at the gunwale. "You need a ride into town?" "I'll walk." He nodded. He didn't say goodbye. He just turned and started coiling a line, his back to me, already moving on to the next task. The next supply run, the next researcher. I walked up the dock, past other boats with colorful names, past piles of crab traps, past a man pressure washing his deck. The sounds were loud and human. I kept walking until the harbor was behind me and the streets began. I didn't look back at the water. I found a room in a motel that smelled of carpet cleaner and pine-scented disinfectant. I filed my reports from the small desk using their shaky Wi-Fi. I wrote nothing of consequence. I requested my final pay be direct deposited. A week later, I accepted a position with a geological survey team in Idaho. The work involved mapping ancient lakebed sediments. The landscape was dry, vast, and silent in a way that held no echo. The horizons were made of stone and dust. I never went back to the ocean, not for work, not for a visit, not even to stand on a beach and listen. The sound of surf became a thing I remembered but did not hear. The smell of salt air, an archived datum. The pull of the tide was a force I allowed to lapse, a mathematical formula I let fade from memory. Some distances are permanent. The channel was still there, on a map, between two rocks. But I had crossed my own personal line, the one that separates the observer from the observed. And that voyage had no return ticket. The data was closed. The notebook was full. The water was just water again, somewhere far away. And I kept my attention on the solid, measurable ground.